Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Sonic the Hedgehog 2, brought to us by Sega. This version I'm playing here, the Master System version, was only released in Europe and some parts of Asia, though the Game Gear version was released worldwide. Sadly, the Game Gear version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the 8-bit version, has a not only smaller resolution, but also didn't compensate for that smaller resolution with its sprites and the like, thus making the game in some ways really hard to see what you're doing, and makes some areas of the game a little bit unfair. The Master System version, though, doesn't suffer from those issues, and is the version I much prefer to play. In this run of the game, I will be collecting the Chaos Emeralds. Just like with the first 8-bit Sonic, they're spread out in the levels itself, not from a special bonus level at the end or by hitting a checkpoint marker. The controls for this game pretty much remain largely unchanged. You're able to jump, but you don't have the spin dash or anything from Sonic 2, just your regular spin. Interestingly, the game came out in October of 1992, 1 month before Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Genesis was released. So, not by much, this one is technically the older of the games. This first level is a bit tricky as you're running through the different minecarts. Be careful of a bunch of pits that are scattered throughout. You'll use these springs to get across most of the level before finally we reach the sign at the end. The second act of each one of the zones is the one that contains the Chaos Emerald. Unlike the first Sonic for Sega Master System, which could have had them in either of the acts, Act 1 or 2, this one only has them in that second act. Now, to get a lot of these Chaos Emeralds, you have to go a little bit out of your way. Thankfully, they're not too challenging to get, but you have to know where to look. Early on, we're going to make sure we get to this top part here, and when you're in this cart, ride it until the point I jump. It's a little bit after you go off of the ledge. You don't want to jump right away or else you won't make it. So you have to time it just right so you're able to make it up there. And then do a nice spin down this big hill and fly over. And then you want to do another jump out of the cart, a little easier of a jump this time, in order to get up there and grab that first Chaos Emerald. Then just drop down, be careful of the spikes. Sometimes it's just unavoidable. Either way, get back on safe land and go over to the sign to finish up Act number 2. Act 3 doesn't give you any rings, and some of these are actually pretty challenging, plus you have a boss encounter at the end of each one of these Act 3s. Unlike a lot of Sonic games, instead of battling Dr. Eggman or Dr. Robotnik, you are battling these mechanical animals. The first one is an antlion that we're going to be facing off with. Be careful of that first jump that you land safely over to the right side and can get up. Thankfully, this level isn't too tricky to get through. This second hill that you fly down, you'll be grabbed by Eggman and taken to the battlefield. The battle is pretty easy. All you need to do is jump over the bombs that are coming down. You don't have to do anything with the antlion itself, so don't even get close to it if you can. Just get into a nice rhythm with the timing. Usually I wait until it gets pretty close, and you'll see right when it does that last one, I can do my jump, and since Sonic can jump a lot higher than these things are bouncing, I'm able to get over them. I always have a lot of trouble with this fight, and pretty much all the boss fights in the Game Gear version, just because of the smaller resolution. For the final one, it's actually Eggman himself that'll come charging in. Just make sure you jump over him, and he'll crash into the antlion, taking it out. And now, instead of having one of the capsules on the ground, we have these floating ones that we have with the big mustache representing Eggman that we end up releasing the animal buddies from. Next up is Sky High Zone. This one is a favorite of mine, reminds me of Hilltop Zone from Sonic 2, though there isn't any of the levels that kind of cross over like the first Sonic on the 8-bit systems. This one has all unique zones to it, though one's very similar to a classic zone for sure. The paraglider here is a bit tricky to control. It's not as fluent as Mario's cape, for example, in Super Mario World. You can get a little bit of speed and you can dive a bit, but you gotta be careful just trying to get that little bit of air, just keep afloat so you can get over whatever gap you need with it. The one at the beginning of Act 2 you can actually use and fly to the Chaos Emerald, but there's another way to get it bouncing off clouds, so I find that to be a bit easier to do. Now, once we get a little bit into the level and start bouncing off of these clouds, you'll notice the kind of big fluffy ones that have like an end point on both the left and right side, and then the kind of big points in the middle. Well, you want to line yourself up with the first of the big one on that last cloud, and then you can hit just high enough to grab the Chaos Emerald. You may want to go back, rewind that a few times in case you're trying to use this as a guide. You have to kind of line it up just right, but you'll see it, being able to line up with the cloud and bounce up and grab that Chaos Emerald. Then finish up the level just using the paraglider, the hang glider here. Just have to float a little bit. You don't have to go too far with it, thankfully. Act 3, thankfully, the weather has cleared up. Be careful of the enemy right there. A few gaps that you'll have to cross over. Thankfully, this one's not too bad as we make our way over to this area. Deal with these robot birds. You have to deal with 2 sets of them, and once you've dealt with all of them, then you'll go down to the bottom level here with the cloud. Now you want to destroy all of them with the eggs as well, and when you destroy the last eggs, the giant mechanical Swan makes its appearance. Basically, you want to bounce off of its head and then get away from it so that you can get over the flame that's coming towards you. When you bounce off of it, sometimes it does send you flying, so you don't have even a choice other than to bounce way away. Just be careful with that sometimes. If there's already a fireball in the air, you want to try to hit towards the back of the head, so that way you bounce towards the left wall and don't go flying to the right, potentially flying into that already thrown out fireball. Aqua Lake is up next. The second act in this one is something that I am not a fan of whatsoever. One of my least favorite levels, probably my least favorite in the game. But the first and third acts, at least, have kind of a interesting, cool look overall to them. Now, when you roll into the water with enough speed, you'll actually automatically skip all the way across. On this last one, you want to then drop down into the water, and be careful as you do so. This is the location of the end sign. If you're wondering about the end panel signs, this time around, you usually end up getting a Dr. Robotnik or Eggman. But you can get the ring, which gives you 10 rings for the next level. You can get a Sonic, which gives you an extra life, or a Tails, which gives you a continue. Act 2 for Aqua Lake is pretty much another level of Labyrinth Zone. Even the tiles are similar to what you saw in Labyrinth Zone. One cool thing, though, that you get to do in this, instead of just worrying about the air bubbles that you can use to get your oxygen back, you can also get inside of bubbles, and you have to use them to float around and get around some obstacles. a little bit tricky at times during the course of this level. Here we're going to use the first of them to kind of float our way across so we can get over those spikes without taking any damage. Though I immediately fall into a pit not too long after, so it's not like it was for much good. Inside of the bubble you can slow it down so you can kind of sneak under things as well as speed up, but that's about it. If you crash into any of the objects or walls that are like, you will pop the bubble, so you have to be very careful when you need to keep the bubble for a longer period of time. Here's an example where we have to kind of get underneath these spikes and then keep going, but I just barely clipped that corner. And unfortunately, another bubble replacement doesn't come on this platform. You have to go back down here and get another one. Thankfully, I was able to reach that bubble with a nice high jump. Now, during the course of this level, we will be getting the Chaos Emerald, but it is near the end of the stage. It's during one of those tunnel sequences with those ones that are kind of pushing you really quickly. When you make it up here, be careful not to hit the springs. They just kind of lead you up the wall. You'll get some rings, but you won't be able to land on the platform above. Once at the top, we're going to go through the speedy tunnel. You're going to want to hold left on the D-pad the entire time until it shoots you out into the room with the Chaos Emerald. So just hold left, go through a winding path, but eventually you'll make it there. Now just go through the path the rest of the way and finish up the level. Just have a little bit further to go here. Grab this bubble here and you have to kind of make your way up slowly, watching out for spears that are going to come out of the left and right. Remember, you can slow down at times. Thankfully, there are some rings during this, so at least you'll have a few while you're making your way up here. Be careful of the edges of these platforms. You don't have to have the bubble, but you can use it to get up. And when you make it finally to the top, it's the end of the stage. Thankfully, Act 3 is back out into the open part of Aqua Lake. I like being able to bounce off of the water. It's kind of a cool feature with the skipping. Over here to the right, we have to use a bubble to ride ourselves up to the top. Just be careful, of course, since we don't have any rings, and the spikes that are on some of these platforms will potentially take us out. Here we go with the boss encounter. It's the seal, and basically what you need to do is just wait for it to start blowing up the ball and pop it as soon as it turns its head upwards. You can tell when it's about to start doing it. If you do a high enough jump, you can hit it as soon as he makes the turn up. It's really an easy fight. Just keep the jumps timed and you shouldn't have any problem taking out the seal and moving on to the next zone. Yep, next up is Greenhills Zone. Not Green Hill, Greenhills. Plural. I always felt that this level should have been the first set of levels. The only act that really ends up throwing it off is the third one. The third act is pretty tricky to kind of get through and then deal with the boss for Greenhills, but the first two acts really are pretty easy, simple levels. I'm not sure if there was ever a plan to have a different level be the first zone, but if there was, I have a feeling it was definitely this one. It's always fun to get the Invincibility Monitor and use that to just run through a large portion of enemies if possible, jumping onto spikes as well. You're also safe from pits, but the problem is when the invincibility runs out, you're still going to end up losing a life because you're in the pit. Act number 2 is where we're going to have to keep an eye out for that Chaos Emerald. We're going to be using a couple of springs to bounce ourselves up to a high platform a little bit ways into the level. Interestingly, the game does have two endings to it, a bad ending and the good ending for getting all of the Chaos Emeralds. The bad ending, though, is activated before the final zone. What you have to do in order to get to the final zone and get the good ending is collect all those Chaos Emeralds. You must have 5 going into the second to last zone where you face off with Silver Sonic. There, if you defeat Silver Sonic, you get the 6th Chaos Emerald. Well, once again, 6 in this game. And thus, you're able to move on to the 7th and final zone. Here's the spring that we're bouncing off of. Just gotta be careful you don't overshoot it and accidentally go over, but not too bad of a Chaos Emerald to get. Now, Act 3 of Greenhills is a bunch of springs that you have to bounce off of. You can't really see where you're going to land, and there's a lot of spikes. In fact, the last one is a really tough jump off of a spring to kind of get over enough to land safely. A few points I take my time just because I want to make sure I line myself up and get to the right set of springs. Here we go with a big leap off that last one, just barely able to make it up there. Thankfully, that is the end here, and we deal with the boss encounter. For this boss, he just rolls back and forth starting off, and then he'll fly across, straight across from the left to right side and then back. And finally finishing up with jumping from one side to the other. Once again, not really a challenging fight, you just want to make sure that when you're hitting it, that you don't accidentally stay too long so that you come back down and he's already gotten all those invulnerability frames and you instantly get hit because of it. You do have to be a little bit quick to make sure that you hit it before it does transform, though. Next up is Gimmick Mountain Zone. Very interesting title for sure. We have these, you have to hold right on the D-pad, and that will allow you to build up speed and eventually be able to then jump off of it and fly up where you need. You just have to kind of time it so you go where you want instead of flying back down below or just straight across. Always nice to get that invincibility right there, and you can use that for a bit of a level here. During these segments here, these push and pull you to the left and right sides into those spikes, so you have to be very careful. If you still have the invincibility, it really does help out real quick being able to get through that easily. Jump at the right time and you can get up there. I just timed it by just a hair. Next set is the same thing we just did a moment ago pretty much, but now you have some moving platforms as well. Thankfully, Sonic's jump is so high up that you're able to reach a pretty good amount of height. Thankfully, also, another Invincibility Monitor as we get into another one of the mine carts, but we are finishing up the level here. Right at the beginning of Act 2 is where we're going to be heading towards the Chaos Emerald. Start off by going across a few conveyor belts. Then when you climb up here, you're going to want to jump to the left inside of the wall. Yep, inside of the wall, and then work your way over to the left side. Bounce off of the spring, get up onto these two things, and then on the top platform is the location of the 5th Chaos Emerald. The last one that we need to guarantee that we're going to get the good ending, because once we have that now, we just have to complete the rest of the game, facing off with Silver Sonic next, and then finally Eggman in the 7th zone. Be careful of the exploding enemy right at the top there. Then drop on down, you'll go flying all the way across, right into another bomb guy potentially, then another corridor with the spikes on the walls and being kind of pulled into them. Here's another invisible wall. There's just a monitor over there with some extra rings, I'm pretty sure. Right at the bottom of this hill, though, is the end sign, and we're moving on to Act 3. Start off by dropping down the big pit that'll again go through a small little tunnel, and then you'll go right into another one that'll send you out where you'll have to go across a few conveyor belts. Be careful of them, then activate this platform. Basically, what you'll need to do is ride a series of platforms throughout the course of this level in order to make your way over to the end. Just be careful you don't stay on it for too long here and end up riding right up into that spike. Either jump to the platforms here or just kind of wait for the platform itself to bring you there. You don't have to duck, I just do that for fun. And then you just continue riding it over to the left side. Up at the top is the next boss encounter. This boss will charge into the wall, causing the spikes that it has to retract, and thus giving you the opportunity to land an attack. Just be careful though, once you've landed that attack, as soon as he hits the wall, he's going to cause rocks to fall. So you only have a few moments to attack him, while also then making sure you're going to be able to get in between those rocks. If you time it right, you can jump up and come crashing down right as soon as he hits the wall, so that you'll hit him immediately. It can be a little bit tricky with the timing, but still not too bad of a fight as we get ready for the next zone. Scrambled Egg Zone is up next, and this one would be the last zone if you're going for the bad ending, not collecting the Chaos Emeralds. This one is filled with pipes that you have to hold the direction that you want to kind of go through which pipes. So there's a lot of times with 3 or 4 directions throughout the course of the pipe that you'll have to make sure that you hit in order to go the right way, or you'll end up having to either restart or going around in a loop. I constantly make mistakes with the pipes, either going the wrong way or accidentally going through just an unnecessary path. Thankfully, they start off relatively uncomplicated, but they ramp up in difficulty as we make it through the course of this level. Here you see a giant arrow pointing you in the right direction. You want to go through this pipe and actually head all the way down, but unfortunately I make the mistake of going through and coming out there where I end up getting hit. Then back up here and try it again. Go through and now hold down when I make it to that path right there, so I can make it all the way through this very winding path. You can go over to this side if you want to get an extra life, but either way you want to kind of go down and land on this platform, and then quickly, as it's going to fall, you have to jump over to the left to the next pipe. Here you can go through if you want to grab another one. And then make sure when you're on this platform you ride it across and then jump up at the right moment to land safely on the next little platform that will fall, and you can then ride the platform the rest of the way to that next pipe. The end path moves a little bit quick here as we're going to hold right, and then as we're coming around that bend immediately hold left to get up and to the first act sign. Thankfully, Act 2 isn't as tricky as Act 1 is with the pipes. Watch out for the exploding enemies and make your way over to that right side, flying through that first pipe, and then head upwards, going through the next pipe right here, and you'll land on a platform. Thankfully, right below that is some safe ground, but there's also some enemies as well as spikes, so be careful and make your way over to the right. Ride this platform over and then jump through the quick moving pipe. If you do it at the right time, you should be able to land back on the platform safely, and then you'll do it again with the next platform. Keep riding that one over to the far right side. It'll rise up a bit. You just gotta be careful that you don't go too quickly through this. You can kind of see where the platform is. If you go too fast, you'll just fly through the path and end up crashing down below, missing the platform. Jump into this last pipe and hit the sign to finish up the level. Act number 3 starts us off with a spring leading into more pipes. Thankfully though, you don't have to worry too much about this first pipe. Just ride it all the way through, don't hold any of the directions. It'll land you onto this spring and you can just kind of bounce that way up all the way to the top. Once here, use the springs to get up to this platform, and then you're going to want to use the next springs to just kind of keep working your way slowly up. You'll land on this platform, go through the pipe. It's just a nice big zigzag, nothing that you have to really worry too much about, and it'll fire you out in the Silver Sonic battle. The Silver Sonic fight is actually very similar to the Mecha Sonic fight from Sonic the Hedgehog 2. You can actually, though, when in the air, since he doesn't have spikes rotating around him when he does the ball, you can bounce him and have him fly across the screen and then land where you can hit him again. Most of the time you just gotta wait for him to land, then jump on top for an easy hit. When it's destroyed though, you'll grab the Chaos Emerald, and that's the end of the level. You don't have to worry about hitting another capsule or anything. We just move on to the next zone. The last zone of the game is Crystal Egg Zone. I've always liked the look of this one, the color scheme, as well as just kind of the glass platforms that you have to go through and jump on. For a final zone overall, it's not too bad. It's not as tricky as the last one where we had to deal with the pipes or anything like that. Just have to focus on some platforming and making our way through. Be very careful here. If you do fall, just keep grabbing the ring one by one until hopefully you land safely on the far right. Just keep heading right here and we finish up the first act. The second act is pretty much more of the same. Just make sure you have some rings on you, so if you do end up falling into spikes or anything like that, you don't accidentally end up losing a life. Jump out of here and then bounce off of the springs in order to make your way up to the top. From there, jump across. You can do a nice slide and then flying across with a big jump, landing here, and then use these to make your way up. These work exactly the same as the other ones, just hold right on the D-pad to build up that speed and then launch yourself upwards. A little bit of a hidden path here, you have to get up here, sometimes it's difficult. Don't move on the spring after hitting it, just bounce off, and then when you make it to the top of that bounce, then hit right on the D-pad. Sometimes that one hallway is a little tricky to get through, but just kind of keep moving your way through to the right, and then eventually you'll bounce out and have to focus on working your way to the left here, bouncing out and breaking a bunch of bricks along the way. After that, climb up these icy kind of hills, be very careful of them. Then bounce your way up to the top and over to the far right where we will finish up the act. The final boss encounter is a pretty challenging one, and thankfully we don't have to do anything really before the boss. You have to attack the Eggman machine, but every time that you do, it ends up firing out these projectiles that then rotate all around. For the most part, you can hang out inside of these pipes, and that way you'll avoid the electric shocks that he ends up doing and the projectiles that are flying around. You need to get a nice rhythm, though, of coming out of the pipe as they're going away and flying out and hitting Dr. Robotnik. It took me a while to kind of figure out when I should come out and when I shouldn't. Sometimes I risk it, like right there I came out too early and almost ended up dying there. You want to wait more until they're going a little bit farther apart, so that when you do come out, like right there, that they are like almost off screen already, and they're not really going to come back across the center part where you're about to fly out. That's not to say that this fight, though, gets any easier regardless of strategy. It's still a pretty tricky overall fight, and since you don't have any rings, of course, it can end at a very quick note. Hopefully you'll get some timing as the fight continues on. Be careful, sometimes he'll fire out another set of projectiles immediately after another set. so you'll have to wait an extra little bit of time before attempting to come out and go for a hit. Once you deliver the final hit though, go through this pipe and sit back and enjoy the ending to Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Master System. So there you have it, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Master System. The difference between the bad and good ending is, in the bad ending, it's kind of a darker color scheme going on here, it's sadder. Though it's the same music in both versions, though the Game Gear changed it so that it was a different, happier sounding song for the ending for the good one. However, in the bad ending for this one, you don't have Tails with you, as well as at the end, you get to see both Sonic and Tails in the sky if you collect all the Chaos Emeralds. However, if you don't have all the Chaos Emeralds, you just see Tails, I guess signifying that he died, which is pretty morbid, I guess, but either way, I wouldn't be surprised. As the credits finish up, we then pan up into the sky to see both Sonic and Tails amongst the stars. You can wait a little bit at the end screen and then it'll go over to the game over screen and you can start the game all over again. But with that, guys, going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.